Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last live stream of the 2022-23 season. I don't know if it's going to be an emotional one there. I don't know if you're feeling a bit sad, Ben, or are you excited for the season to end? We've got Forever QPR from Sweden. He says, "Here you go, lads. A like before the stream has even started." We love that from you there. Forever QPR sweet, and just welcome to everybody new and old to the final live stream of the season. Now, before we get started, do make sure that you're subscribed, because all through the summer we're going to be doing a lot of content. We're going to be trying to target daily shorts in terms of maybe some historical injuries in the Premier League. We had a lot of good feedback on the Luke Shaw one, so more stuff like that, kind of just analysis on that. Then also we'll be doing some big interviews with some great people. As always, we've got some fantastic guests lined up, some really good analysis, and then also we'll be doing the FPL stuff as well. So we will be not on the screens doing live streams, but we will be doing other stuff behind the scenes, some great work, and Ben and I are already compiling some of the data for the season as we speak. But just handing it over to you, big man. How you doing today? Did you say 17 press conferences today? Just the 17?
Well, 20 today, actually. 17 from 12:30, 16 from 1:30. So a little bit busy. So I want to kick off the top of today's show and basically say, look, the information that you see on the screen as it currently stands, just disregard it. Listen to what we have to say. Listen to the context. There will be changes, and I guarantee 100,000,000% there will not be one perfect predicted start 11 this weekend. I will. The final weekend is notorious. We will see a dramatic increase in the number of rotations from managers, and that's just on a typical ordinary season. This year, congested fixture period due to that Winter World Cup. Lots of games in the final sort of quarter since the beginning of April. So, now that teams and positions are more or less locked in, and I know you will argue about, the potential of the rising and falling position may cost this, certain clubs a couple of £1 million. But, like I say, for a lot of these teams, and a lot of players who've been managing those niggles, those problems, those minor ailments, there will be changes. And of course, I think there's going to be the odd sentimental player chucked in at the end there, just, as one final hurrah and swan song before they move off to pastures new.
Hopefully that's somebody like Rob Holding for Arsenal, just get him out the door. And just to remind people, obviously, as you said, Ben, the news is going to be ever changing. It's a really, really tight day for that final day of the season. And you can check out the Premier Injuries website, which we will endeavour to keep up to date as much as possible. Just like what we're going to do now, it's all alphabeticalised. You can go on any team, click on them, and find out the latest from the players that we have got in terms of updates. You did mention about the likelihood of turnover and stuff. I have written an article for FF Scout here when teams have nothing to play for, because a lot of teams will have nothing to play for, which people can check out if they have a Scout membership. But we're going to go on to your predicted lineups, which you've warned may not be too accurate this game week. Just before we start, Slavcho says, "Hey Ben and Jay, just wanted to stop by and thank you both for the great content and help through the season. It's proved to be a massive help, and I wouldn't be in the top 20k. My goodness me." That is absolutely fantastic, and he's waiting for bloopers, you promise. So we got to have for that. There you go. There's already a blooper there. Fantastic pronunciation on all the players today, Ben. Like Kulukevsky, as we like to say. But yeah, starting with Bournemouth. What is the latest news, Ben?
Yeah, just heard from Gary O'Neill. There was a couple of players called into question. We've seen the absence of Philip Bingen last weekend. That was due to a back problem. He's trained all week, so that's absolutely fine. We have him and we'll keep him in that starting 11. Elsewhere, there was hope that Hamid Traore could recover from a foot problem. That's been going on for quite a while now. It's touch and go as it currently stands. One more training session on Saturday. So, at best, we're probably looking at the bench. There's also a late test in for Joe Rothwell, although I suspect he may just miss out for Lewis Cook. Gary O'Neill did say that this is maybe an opportunity to rest players, to get that treatment, to get that recovery process started ahead of pre-season. Of course, you don't want anybody missing that coming together at the beginning of July, because we know statistically, and the evidence will support that those players, the more pre-season you can get under your belt, and the more sessions you get, the less likelihood it is of suffering an injury during the course of a normal campaign.
Yes, so we're going to continue with this analysis, but Sam Smith and Russell Skidmore have also said big thank yous. It's very kind of you to say. Now, Arsenal, is this one a difficult one to predict? Because, they literally have nothing to play for now. They've not played well for the last few matches. There's a few players in there, especially in that Nottingham Forest game, they just didn't look at it. Do you reckon there will be quite a bit of rotation? Because, for me personally, I don't know why the likes of Smith Rowe, Reece Nelson, and maybe some of the youth prospects as well who are coming through, why they haven't been given a little bit of a chance. Because as much as I love Saka, he's not been at it the last few games. Trossard wasn't looking great. Nketiah, you've kind of put him in the team there. Maybe he should have got a start ahead of Gabriel Jesus, or Trossard played in that false nine and put out Reece Nelson on the left-hand side. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think maybe, however unlikely as it may have been, Mikel Arteta, would have believed that while it was mathematically possible, Arsenal could have still won the league. And that's why he's continued to go strong with his team. And of course, it wasn't until that defeat at the City ground last time out, that handed the title to Manchester City. So, in his defence, that's maybe what he's thinking. We've carried this team all the way through. These are the players that have got us into the position, more or less. Let's stick with those. Now, with regards to this predicted lineup, and like I say, we have that place in second locked in now. So we know Leandro Trossard carrying a little bit of a knock and a niggle. Bukayo Saka also has been managing an issue for quite a while now, for a number of weeks. And that probably just goes back to something you said. He hasn't been in great form, certainly not the form that we've seen in the beginning, the middle part of the season, when he was on fire. So that injury's probably hampered him a little bit. So I'm thinking we'll probably look to bring these two players out. And Reece Nelson missed out last weekend because of illness, is certainly a strong shout. And as you touched upon, Emile Smith-Rowe. I also suspect that we've seen maybe Thomas Partey start at right back because Ben White, again, isn't maybe 100%. There's been a lot of talk throughout the course of the season that he's maybe managing an issue and it's went under the radar. So possibly Thomas Partey in at right back as well, with Jorginho starting centrally. So that's what I'm sort of toying at this moment in time. Though guaranteed there will be changes. And like I say, there's no need to be taking any risks at this stage, because, Arsenal are locked in and there's nothing to gain from pushing those players any further.
Do you see maybe some of the other players in the squad who get limited minutes or should be growing into the team for next season as well? The likes of Fabio Vieira, but even like the younger players as well coming up through the youth system. Could they get a few minutes as well?
I definitely think Vieira is in with a strong shout. Granit Xhaka, rumoured to be potentially his last game for Arsenal, heavily linked with a move away from the Emirates. So, that's a player who, like I say, I don't necessarily see dropping out of the starting 11, but, he may have that 60 to 70 minute run out. He's won over that Arsenal crowd following, issues that are going back maybe 12 to 18 months ago, something that you would never expect. So I do think he'll make that starting 11, but I think he'd probably come off nice and early hopefully, with the points in the bag, and that will maybe afford opportunities elsewhere to those players who are maybe on the fringes of that squad, or certainly that starting 11.
Now, Marius has said RIP to Jesus as a punt, Trossard hype increase. And then also Marius has said Isaac to Nketiah. How certain are you that Nketiah starts? I mean, are you certain on any of the players here? It seems like that there's no kind of fixed Arsenal 11 for the first time in a long time.
I mean, if you read the small print at the bottom of this, the disclaimer, I've washed my hands of all of these predicted lineups. What you see and what I post may not reflect in any way, shape or form to the reality of the situation on Sunday. So look, there are absolutely no guarantees. It will come down to individual managers. It will come down to, like I say, players, whether aware of or not, who've been carrying those minor knocks and niggles. It will come down to their particular circumstances with regards to positions and other external influence and factors which will determine what happens on that pitch. So look, what I'm trying to do here is maybe read between the lines, second guess, see who maybe deserves a place in that starting 11, that opportunity to express themselves, and again, rest those players who have been, particularly in the case of Arsenal, have been, pretty much pushed hard throughout this campaign. And let's not forget, their recent run, is it 2 wins in 8 or 2 wins in 9? So I don't recall, but they've pushed Manchester City for the most part all the way. And Manchester City, you could argue, it's probably one of the best Premier League teams we've had in a long time, if not the greatest ever, and probably one of the greatest domestic teams in the world.
This is the point, is I'm not too upset about the outcome of the season. It's just kind of the way that we've collapsed towards the end. It is more of the problem. And I guess as well, with a lot of our discussions, I say it in the article as well, at this time of the season, you kind of want to pick players that have something to play for, and also players who are nailed on. And unfortunately, I don't think you can really trust any Arsenal players. But we do come to Aston Villa, who have a lot to play for in that final game of the season. They need a win to be able to secure European football. This could be a big moment in their history for them, returning to Europe for... I can't remember the last time, actually, Ben. You might have better memories on this. But yeah, this is a huge game for them, playing Brighton. It's not going to be easy, but you could pick some players from this team because they're going to be fighting tooth and nail to get into Europe there. What is the latest injury news?
Yeah, so we haven't actually heard from Unai Emery as it currently stands, but what we do know, Alex Moreno was forced off at Anfield last weekend. That's a hamstring-related problem, although post-match comments said that the fullback would need to be evaluated. I don't expect him to feature. We're talking at least 2 to 3 weeks for that typically. So that's why we have Lucas Digne. I also have Matty Cash, who returned from his calf problem to oust Ashley Young from the right back spot. I keep Cash in that team. And we also seen Boubacar Kamara return to the Villains midfield. Of course, he spent several weeks out with an ankle problem before returning and then aggravating that as well. So he's back in the mix, and that changes things up ever so slightly. We have seen a slight formational tweak with Leon Bailey again coming in on the right-hand side. It's Emi Buendia, the player who's missing out. We have seen Villa set up in a 4-4-2, but I'm going with that 4-2-3-1 on the back of that performance against Liverpool last weekend.
Now, continuing the analysis, we've got Brentford up next. It's going to be a changed team. It's with the situation of Ivan Toney now clear. But is there any other changes to the 11?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Thomas Frank as it currently stands. But what we do know, we have the absence of those long-term injuries. Christoph Ayer is the one that has returned to the matchday squad. He hasn't quite been able to get those minutes since recovering from that problem. So again, that's maybe one of those issues where we see on the final day where managers will sort of throw players back in there. So he is a possibility. But I don't really see David Raya drop out with Strauss-Kova has been managing on, and an ongoing issue with his calf. But like I say, I think David Raya keeps his place. But elsewhere, other than that, we're not expecting to have any sort of great deal of change. We know that Ivan Toney, that ban has come through. That rules him out now until the beginning of next year. I think it's January the 17th. He can actually return with the squad. But he will be able to begin training with the rest of the group from September.
They do have something to play for as well, Brentford, so they'll be aiming to beat Manchester City in that final game of the season. I do have a question on Keane Lewis Potter. Is that his name? He had a knee injury, didn't he? Could he be brought in, as a wild card for that final game of the season, or is it he's been out for so long, and also because the game's quite important, they won't roll the dice on him?
Yeah, he's out for the season. They suspected at the time he actually went under the knife to remedy that issue, and it had been touch and go, a 50-50 call, but Thomas Frank sort of announced around about 2 weeks ago now that Keane Lewis Potter again would not be fit for those remaining fixtures. And it's one of those ones, Brentford, a really well-run club, the way they manage their players, and no risk. Again, it doesn't really make any sense at all to risk any players and potentially, suffer any kind of setback, which would maybe keep them out of that pre-season program. So, like I say, Keane Lewis Potter is out of the game. So, unfortunately, we won't see him.
Oh, that's a shame. Marius says, will Brentford search for a Toney replacement? I guess that's maybe a discussion that we will have over the summer. We're going to bring on experts from teams, and I think that is a big point. Will they look to buy another striker? But you can't really replicate Toney without spending massive money. He's such a good striker. Brighton are up next. What is the latest with the Seagulls? Again, they do have a little bit to play for. That they've got Europe confirmed, but if results go their way, they kind of want to cement their position, don't they? What is going to happen with the team? Do you see some rotation in there?
Probably not as much as what Roberto De Zerbi would have liked. Injuries mean that his hand will be certainly forced in certain areas of the pitch. We've seen Lewis Dunk, I think, rested for a rare occasion on Wednesday night. Have him coming back into the team. Levi Colwell starting again. Of course, he missed a game against Newcastle. That was fatigue related. I have him in there. And Joel Veltman as well. He was returning from a hamstring problem. It looks as if he should be okay to start at right back, which then opens the door for Pascal Gross to be pushed a little bit higher up the pitch, maybe at the expense of somebody like maybe Billy Gilmore, and then Alexi Mac-10 to sit in that role behind, who I think will be Evan Ferguson. It's, we've seen De Zerbi flip-flop between Danny Welbeck and Ferguson. So for me, it's Ferguson that will get the nod. Mitoma is a player who's probably played and made more starts than anyone else of that big sort of trio, the Caicedo, the Mac, and we know Solly Marsh is out of that game. So Mitoma is one of those ones who's at risk. We are waiting to hear from De Zerbi. There was no mention post-match midweek, but Enciso looked as if he may have had a slight issue with, I think, with his left hamstring. He was seen stretching it off around that half time. He did come out for the second half, but he was replaced early on. Now, again, whether that was just a bit of a precautionary measure, maybe it was nothing, but it's certainly something to keep your eye on.
And sorry, just to correct again, a blooper here. Brighton are in their position now, that there's no way people can catch up with them. So do you think that, with that coupled in mind with, the fact that they've had a really busy schedule, could they be a team that maybe let their foot off the gas a little bit? That might actually allow Aston Villa in a little bit. Villa have got a lot to play for. They're looking over their shoulders at Tottenham. They're looking over their shoulders at the likes of Brentford as well. There's three teams there competing for that final European spot. Could this be a game to target? Because we have seen Brighton in recent games, when they've had a little bit of rotation, that they did have a couple of big losses in there, some shock ones. Could Villa bring a shock to them as well?
Yeah, I'm sure there might have been a few post-match celebratory glasses of champagne midweek after that, that European spot was confirmed. We heard from Manchester City and Pep Guardiola 40 hours before that game, in his own words, they drank Manchester dry. So like you say, now that that's secured, do I see them taking the foot off the gas? Maybe ever so slightly. But again, players will want to end the season on a high. And, potentially you have maybe a handful of players within that team who it could be their final game for the Seagulls. The McAllisters, the Caicedos, heavily linked away. So, they'd want to go out on a high as well, and they want to put on a good performance for their supporters. It's a difficult one. If I was a betting man, yeah, I would certainly be leaning towards Aston Villa, given the fact that, they've got it all to play for, and Brighton have already had that in the bag.
I'm not sure I understand this comment from Slavcho. He says that Inisko is already listening to Thong Song. I guess, is that a reference to the beach?
The Thong Song is, probably, it's by Nelly, wasn't it? Thong. I think that was it. I'm sure that was a Nelly song maybe even before your time, Jason. Maybe that's why you are lost on the reference.
I mean, we were talking about thongs earlier, but that was, in terms of running and referencing, because they're key for running equipment, obviously. But yeah, Marius 5-1 for Aston Villa. Could be. I mean, who was it that they played and they got a bit of a shellacking off them? They obviously lost to your boys 4-1. Oh, it was Everton, the 5-1.
Yeah.
And then they lost to Nottingham Forest, which is always a hard game. And then they had that, I'll say, embarrassing loss to Tottenham, who are a relegation level team. So Sam Smith says, I think Tottenham would rather finish 8th than to be off to Bulgarian and Icelandic villages each Thursday. I don't know. I don't really know. So Slavcho says it was a Cisco song.
Was it? Oh, there you go. So it wasn't Nelly. Very good.
Chelsea.
An A plus.
I think, that gets an A plus because it was so high level it went above our heads, and he's had to explain it to us. Chelsea up next. I love the chant that the fans whipped out this week. Manchester United fans were celebrating winning 4-1, and they said, "You're nothing special, we lose every week." So let's see, do they get a win in the final game of the season? Well, what do you think is going to happen with the team, injury-wise, rotation-wise? I mean, can you predict this one? Because it's a predicting of the unpredictable in the most unpredictable game week of the season.
Do they get a win? Obviously not, Jason. So me and you'll be having words after this live stream with regards to that particular comment. There will be changes again to this lineup. This was picked post-match from the game at Old Trafford. I tried to sort of, again, freshen it up a little bit on the basis of that result. But we've since heard from Frank Lampard, and he did talk about the performances of Azpilicueta, which means, which potentially, means that he may retain his place at right back. He also singled out, and I'm looking to pronounce this correctly because it is the last live stream of the season. Let's say Carney Chukwuemeka.
I don't know if you pronounce that correctly.
Of course I did, Jason.
Yeah, sorry.
We move, yeah. So the 19-year-old was handed his first start under Frank Lampard, and again he was singled out for praise for his performance on the night. So maybe he gets another bash at that. Elsewhere, you also question what advantage or what benefits you may have from keeping the likes of a João Felix in your team. He'll come to the end of his loan period. He won't be staying beyond that, from my understanding. So, do you play him in the last game, or do you want to try and maybe blood somebody else and possibly throw in Fofana as an option in that attacking role, maybe on that left-hand side? We just don't know, but there will be changes. Thiago Silva was a player that was rested on Thursday night, so that's why we have him back in it. We could maybe switch back to a 3-5-2 here. Chalobah's been playing well since he returned to the Blues lineup, so maybe Wesley Fofana, Thiago Silva and Chawaloa as the three centre-backs, with maybe Hall and Azpilicueta either side, and then the three could be Fernandes, maybe Gallagher and Loftus-Cheek. Like I say, it's to be discussed. And also, there's a conundrum over the goalkeeper. We did see a brief return to the side for Edward Mendy, but then Kepa was back, so I didn't really understand that decision from Frank Lampard. Why bring him in just for that one game? Obviously a little bit rusty, probably at fault for at least one goal in his time, but then he throws Kepa back in there. So there will be changes to the blue lineup, and they will lose.
Yes, no, that was a cheeky comment from me at the start. I think we'll get onto it with Newcastle, but you wrote about it as well in your 888bet article. I'm back in Wilson this game week as maybe not a fully differential captain. Maybe I won't put the captaincy armband, but I think you got to own him. I think with the form he's been in, with how good Newcastle have been, this could be like a massive, massive scoreline, like one of those high variance games. Chelsea got nothing much to play for. They've been pretty bad. I guess the only thing going for them is they don't want to be too embarrassed in front of their home fans. Marius agrees. He said, another carnage for Chelsea. Slavcho says, Ludogorets hosting Arsenal a few years back was the best day ever. Me and my brother were shouting Ozil's name after he scored, surrounded by angry Bulgarian Ludogorets fans. Very brave there, Slavcho. Sam Smith says, Chelsea players will be more sober than Newcastle ones, but will still probably lose. I mean, probably the Newcastle players could be fully inebriated and still get the win, couldn't they?
The issue is that the Chelsea squad lineup on paper, they're not a bad set of players. They're in a bad run of form, obviously severely lacking in confidence, and they've been poor, but they are capable of putting a one-off performance in. And if that was on the final day in front of their own supporters to try and end the season on a high, then that could be it. So that is my concern. And of course, Newcastle, and we'll touch upon this, they're managing a lot of issues. We're locked in fourth place, so we've got nothing to play for. It doesn't change anything whatsoever. So the Newcastle lineup's going to be difficult, and Chelsea could make several changes to that starting 11. And as we've seen, there is some quality within that squad. It's just trying to eke out those performances from the players. And so what better occasion to do it on the last game?
Yeah,
we shall see.
Doubt though. High doubt. Crystal Palace. Now this is another one that I think we both touted as an exciting game for the end of the season. Two teams with nothing to play for, both safe in the Premier League, and both not great defences. But who's going to be fit for Crystal Palace? I'm guessing no Zaha at all. He's done for the season, unfortunately.
Yeah, Zaha's probably 7 to maybe 14 days away still from recovering from that hamstring problem that he picked up earlier this month. Doesn't really come as any great surprise. There were worries and concerns when that first happened, and Roy Hodgson feared the worst. This was one of those sentimental picks. I went with James McArthur coming into midfield. That's because Jeffrey Sloop will miss his third game for what's purely been referenced as due to personal reasons. We have seen Will Hughes come in alongside Doucouré, but McArthur hasn't made a Premier League start this season, ends his time, down at Selhurst Park. So I've thrown him in there. Also, I was thinking maybe at right back, I don't see a lot of difference between Ward and maybe Nathaniel Klein. That's possibly a position. Then also, as well, I've thrown Guaita back in there. Missed out last weekend through injuries, recovered from that knock. I know it's a toss-up between Sam Johnson and Guaita. I just went Guaita just because it's that final game. But yeah, I don't really know. I'm not locked in. I'm not 100%. I'm just trying to play percentages and space things up a little bit for game week 38.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, is that is the reality. That's what's going to happen is there's going to be these picks that a lot of people don't see coming. And you kind of got to work and find the best players who are going to start. Just before I move on from Crystal Palace, if you are looking for that game, which I think will have a lot of goals in, Eze, He's got to be the guy to bring in. So then Everton, they do have a lot to play for. Do they have the quality to stay up though? What is the injury situation there? And I guess what are your thoughts on that kind of relegation battle? Are they going to go down? Will they beat Bournemouth?
I mean, it's in their hands first and foremost. Which, if you had asked Sean Dyche when he came into the role, going into game week 38, and you have the opportunity to know that a win would secure your top flight status, would you take that? And I dare say you probably would. Are the circumstances ideal? Probably not. There's a couple of key injuries ahead of the final weekend. Unfortunately, Dominic Calvert-Lewin has picked up another injury. That's hamstring-related problem, so that rules him out. Initially, I went with Ellis Sims to lead the attack, but I just think maybe he will go with Mupai, just that little bit of experience. Hopefully, a little bit of that quality that's reflected in that, that big price tag that the Toffees picked him up for. The second injury is at that right back spot. That was Nathan Patterson. A couple of big injuries this year, knee and ankle related problems. Seamus Coleman was a player that you would see to come in, but he's also out, hoping to be back in pre-season. So I've went with Mason Holgate on this instance. Again, probably due to the fact that Ben Godfrey is also sidelined. On the opposite flank, Mykolenko, we see Dwight McNeil drop a little bit deeper in a slightly tweaked formation. Mykolenko is there or thereabouts. We can't categorically say that he's going to be past fit, but this is a time to be taking chances. And I just think if you've got Mykolenko back in that team, again, then it releases Dwight McNeil, and they've got to be going for 3 points in this game. You cannot, take the draw and then just hope and keep your fingers crossed. I think you go out, you get that win. Bournemouth will be there for the taking, and, get the team over the line.
Well, this is the thing, is they do have the ability on set pieces. Sean Dyche is good at them, and Bournemouth have the most goals conceded from set pieces this season. I think, off the top of my head, I might be wrong here, but they've got 20 goals conceded from them. I mean, it's a pretty poor effort, and it's an obvious weakness in the side. Just continuing with the Everton questions, though, Jaron wants to know, is Mykolenko definitely out? But you're saying he probably isn't. And then what about Damari Gray?
Yeah, following the return of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, we did see Damari Gray playing that, deputised in that attacking role. But we know that Dwight McNeil, which is where Damari Gray tends to be favoured on that left-hand side. Dwight McNeil's one of Sean Dyche's, old favourites. He relied on him. He counted on him a lot of time down at Turf Moor. So game time and minutes have become difficult for Damari Gray in recent times. And I don't really see him forcing his way into that team. Certainly not in this lineup. The only place would be maybe that's, that striker's role, that out and out attack. But maybe I'm just thinking, Sean Dyche will want to play the percentages, and that's why he's going to go for Mupai, even though his form and his return since arriving at Goodison Park hasn't been great. I just think he will give him the nod and hope and pray that, he pays a slice off of that, that big transfer fee by keeping the Toffees in the top flight.
GV says, what tactics would Sean Dyche adopt to win or draw but not lose? So do you think there will be a bit of a tactical tweak here? And I guess with your points there, he probably will stick with McNeil and Iwobi because, he wants to get those crosses into the box. Whereas I don't think Damari Gray is that kind of physical presence to receive the ball, hold up play, kind of play others into the game. He's more of the run at goal kind of player. So yeah, do you see that there's going to be a little bit of a tweak here, or do you think it's going to be kind of a continuation, tried and tested Dyche tactics?
Yeah, I'm thinking, Dyche will not want to change things up too much. We want to keep the players' minds focused on a game plan that they're used to and that they've implemented and that they can continue to deliver. And he will probably reference that result against Brighton, in terms of what they're capable of doing, when that game plan works well. So, that will be their reference point. That will give them the belief. And of course, Bournemouth are nowhere near a Brighton team. So I can see the Toffees, getting this win and securing their top flight status.
Sam Smith says, going a bit off topic, but what's happened to Connor Cody? I think he's a very decent player. Has he been injured, Ben?
Last weekend was at the Wolves game. I'll just double check my notes. Yeah, he was obviously unable to face his parent club last weekend. But of course, again, we talked about some of Sean Dyche's old favourites, which locks in James Tarkowski. And then you had the return to full fitness of Yerry Mina. And Yerry Mina's come in and he's done a fairly sort of solid job. I think he's got himself a goal as well. So you've got that defensive fortitude and as a points per game metric in terms of when Yerry Mina starts and when he doesn't, Everton do perform a lot better. They concede fewer goals and they actually have, they get and earn more points.
I wonder if he'll earn a contract renewal in the summer though, because it's coming up. We'll see. Fulham up next, and it was 2 weeks ago now that we celebrated the return of Mitrovic. And nothing else that weekend. What is the latest for the Cottagers? They're a team with nothing to play with. Pretty bad defence anyway. They're playing Manchester United. Could be a big scoreline. I don't know. But will injuries impact that at all?
We haven't heard from Marco Silva, or shall I say, we may have heard from him, but I haven't because we've been on this live stream. I don't expect huge changes from the treatment room. It's been fairly settled, and in terms of overall injuries across the season, I think the Cottagers are pretty much one of the best performing in terms of those time loss injuries. So we've seen a fairly settled squad overall. Dan James is a player who certainly could force his way back into that matchday squad. And if maybe Mitrovic had been playing and hadn't served that 8-match ban, I think his position may have been up for grabs, but because he's just returned to the side and he's such a pivotal player, I do expect him to lead the line. And that's, we don't have many changes within this team. Mana Solomon is a player who could come in, and you do have Willian there who could maybe switch flanks, but we haven't seen a lot of Harry Wilson this season, so I believe his place is probably locked in. Tom Kearney as well. Maybe one of those holding roles in midfield is possibly up for grabs. But like I say, I don't see Marco Silva changing things too much.
Then we move on to Leeds, another team that is fighting the relegation battle. I think you and I both agreed, though, Ben, that this could be a shock result. I reckon Leeds could beat Tottenham, with the form that they're in. I'm not saying Leeds are a much better team, but the quality of Tottenham has been lacking there for a long while. What is the latest with the injury news? And I guess maybe talk through your thinking behind this as well.
Yeah, so Rodrigo trained for the first time today. We know that he's managing quite a painful ongoing loading problem, base of his foot. That's plantar fasciitis. And that was an injury that we reference with Patrick Bamford, of course, time out on the sidelines, both when he was managing that issue and then when he ruptured his fascia. I think that was against Wolves. And he hasn't really hit the heights of that first season in the Premier League because of that problem. So we know that Rodrigo isn't going to be 100%, but by his own admission, Sam Allardyce said, look, if players are willing to put their bodies on the line and they're willing to play through the pain, then I'm certainly willing to give them a chance and take a gamble on them. That's why he hasn't ruled out Patrick Bamford up until this point. He has a hamstring issue. It's really going to be a late 50-50 call. One more session on Saturday. Do I see Patrick Bamford recovering? It's a difficult one, and even if he is, I just don't rate the guy, unfortunately. I would prefer to see somebody like Willie Gnonto in that team, or maybe Aronson as a possibility elsewhere within that squad. Firpo can return to the left-hand side. Of course, we've seen Struijk in its centre-back on that left-hand side with Max Vuba going in at left-back, but the Spaniard can come in after serving a one-match ban. Other discussions maybe around, that centre-back Christensen and Ayling, and even Forshaw and McKenna around there, and Robin Koch. He's been playing in that advanced midfield role under Sam Allardyce. So there are a few, positional tweaks that Sam Allardyce could make, but this is the best I can go with for now.
And, if you were a betting man, would you bet on Leeds for the win or maybe a draw? Mario says 4-4. High scoring game?
I looked at the odds and I think that Leeds came in at just under 2-1. It was around 9-5. And certainly at that price, and given, you always add context to the situation, at that price, I would be more than happy to back Leeds for the win.
Interesting. GV says whichever two lose from amongst Leeds, Everton and Leicester, FPL will be the loser. We shall see about that, GV. Continuing with the analysis, we do talk about Leicester. Now, what is the latest with the team? They're definitely in the struggles here. Can they stay up?
Oh, that's a big question. It's a tough one. It's obviously out of their hands. For me, I'm thinking probably not now. That point at St James's Park offers a glimmer of hope, a little bit of a lifeline. Dean Smith set up his team, not to lose. Ultimately, they're not in the position that they're in is no different from whether they got beat or whether they took that point. I think for me, should have went out and, at least try to attack Newcastle. And you could argue that his game plan, almost came off with that late Nick Pope save, I think it was from Castagna. But on another day, Newcastle would have scored at least 2 or 3 of those chances, where we hit the post and I think it was the bar. Heads would have went, game plan would have went out the window, and we could have been looking at 3, 4, 5. It didn't happen. Leeds secured Leicester secured their first clean sheet post World Cup. They were the only team to not have had a shutout during that period. I think it was across all of the leagues. But that was, they threw Harry Souttar into the team. They went with a 5-3-2, but because the Foxes need to go out and win, I've took Harry Souttar out, and we should hopefully see a more attacking lineup with Harvey Barnes and also James Maddison back. And of course, they were back on the bench at St James's Park. And I think Dean Smith referenced the fact that, Leicester were too easy to beat and teams were cutting through them too much. So, that was maybe a kick up the backside, maybe for both of those players being singled out like that. Who knows? Who knows what goes on behind the scenes? The rumour mill will suggest that neither player started at St James's Park because both will be coming up to Newcastle in the summer.
That'll be interesting to see if that does happen. And looking at these final games of the season, Leicester versus West Ham, Everton versus Bournemouth, and then we've got Leeds versus Spurs. That's probably the hardest one, I'd say, Leicester versus West Ham. They are at home, but West Ham are very good defensively. They'll shut out, and they're on the high of reaching the European final. But then, will that play in the minds of the Hammers as well? There's a few things at play here, but I can just see Leicester maybe have the hardest one. Everton arguably have the easiest one, but Leeds can shock because Tottenham have been so out of form. So it really is tough to see how they're going to do it. Liverpool up next. This is going to be a fun game. Can see a lot of goals in this one. But who are the players to pick? Because, we're aiming for a lot of goals. We're aiming to capitalise on that. But, people are going with Gakpo, Diaz, Nunez. But you've got Firmino in there as well. That's kind of put a spanner in the works.
Yeah. Came off the bench last weekend to help steal a share of the spoils against Aston Villa. And of course, in his final appearance at Anfield, it just had to be, didn't it? So he brought to an end, a fantastic period of time for Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp. And again, I've just went for that. Now that those Champions League aspirations are now gone, I've went for, again, that. Yes, it is a little bit of an emotional pick, but also, he's a quality player. Maybe there are question marks with regards to his fitness following that hamstring issue that he's just recovered from. So maybe I'm being a little bit blindsided and I've got those rose-tinted glasses on. What we do know is Jurgen Klopp said that there will be changes. There will be opportunities for, one, to freshen up his team, and two, to provide an opportunity for players to showcase their abilities. So it's obviously, he's moving on to different things, but this is maybe an opportunity to freshen up his attack a little bit, and that's why I have him in there. Elsewhere within the team, of course, I think there's a possibility that maybe Jordan Henderson or Fabinho maybe doesn't start. That would be Harvey Elliott that I would expect would maybe come into the team. James Milner is another player who will depart in the summer. But I still see Trent starting and maybe Milner coming on later in the game. Of course, I've got Matip ahead of Konate, who's struggling with illness, and also at left back, Andy Robertson. He tweaked his groin in training on Thursday. There's not a massive issue there. He's had it scanned. It came back relatively clear, but I just think, again, he'll be managed. Klopp won't take any risks, and that's why we have Tsimikas in there.
And so, if you were to pick a 3 from this game, a lot of people are talking about the Liverpool treble up. You have to get 3 in. Who would you select from the Reds for that final game of the season?
It has to be Salah, doesn't it? Surely, in terms of outfield minutes, no player has played more. I think it's only Alisson who's had more minutes altogether. So for that reason alone, I think he started 36 of the 37 games this season, if I recollect. You could have an outside punt on Jones. He's been in great form. That would be a bit of a punt. Trent is another obvious one, and maybe even Van Dijk. That would be, if anybody was looking to keep a clean sheet this weekend, you would look at that Saints attack and think, they're going down pretty much with a whimper. But, as I touched upon before with Chelsea, Saints have got absolutely nothing to lose. This is one last opportunity to play in the top flight before dropping down into that second tier. The handbrake's off, the pressure's gone. Maybe, in front of their own supporters, maybe they want to try and go out with a bang. And maybe some of those players who are potentially linked with a move away, at James Ward-Prowse, maybe putting in one of those special performances.
Now, Manchester City, how hard is this one to predict? Because already you got the Pep roulette. They've won the league. They've been celebrating, as Pep has admitted himself. Who's going to be playing? Do you even want to predict on this one?
So there's two schools of thought. We've seen the Pep that's heavily rotated his team for the last few, and we've seen Edison out for Ortega, and we've seen Lewis come back in, and and Cole Palmer also start. I'm now of the mind that we have an FA Cup final and then a Champions League final on the horizon. Let's keep that nucleus, keep that side strong, keep those players sharp, because it's week to week now. If you drop somebody for this weekend, then potentially, it could be at least, 10 days since they last played, or maybe even 17 days or whatever it is to the Champions League. So for me, I'm expecting City to go pretty strong. I think, midweek, Laporte wasn't part of the group. Grealish didn't travel. Akanji wasn't there. So I definitely see players back, and I've went with what I say is a fairly strong lineup. Phil Foden was one that picked up a slight issue after he scored against Brighton, managed to continue just after the break, and then was replaced. Don't think it's anything too serious. Should be back for the FA Cup final if he's not involved this weekend. And John Stones, that was a fatigue-related issue, but I have him in that starting 11.
Gregor says Grealish is flagged as a doubt on the FPL website, and Maris has kindly informed us that it's because Grealish is 75% drunk. So is he likely to play for those reasons that you stated, that keep him sharp for Champions League and FA Cup?
I mean, again, you can argue you're coming off the back of a long, hard season, and you won't become too deconditioned over such a short period of time. But I'm still of the mind that, you want to keep your best players in tip-top condition. And as we've seen previously, with the likes of the Manes and the Mo Salahs, these players perform at optimum levels when they have a high number of minutes and load in their legs. You don't want that drop-off to become too sharp. I wouldn't worry too much personally with regards to players being flagged at this point. There's very little context given around availability of players at this time, or should I say, at any point. There's quite often, alerts put against players with sometimes very little thought or maybe context around specific issues. So we shall see. But like I say, I don't really expect. Look, we're coming at the stage of the season. Knocks, niggles, and ligaments. Yes, you'll be rested for games which have relatively no meaning. They're coming off the back of quite a heavy night on the drink after winning the league. But when it comes down to the crunch, it'll be Pep's decision on, like I say, whether he wants to continue and keep everybody fresh for that FA Cup, or does he involve his big hitters? Knowing the fact that they need them in their best peak form going into those two matches.
We move on to the other side of Manchester. What is the latest there? Rashford, is he definitely going to start? This is a big, fun game, I think, with Fulham. There is a potential for goals. But, Marius has asked the question, I'm between Salah or Fernandes captain. I don't see why there would be a question on that. You go Salah. Liverpool have been the best attack since game week 30. Salah's been the best attacker since game week 30. Manchester United, their attack is not very good. Fernandes got a goal this game week, but they've not looked great. And I would say you have to back Fernandes. But is the team almost fully back so that you can trust somebody like Fernandes? Or what are your thoughts and feelings on this one, Ben?
Certainly don't buy the Fernandes loving. Spoke ahead of the double game week. And yes, if he was a player within your team, he was probably a player to keep. He certainly doesn't come cheap. And after that first game, we had 3 returns in 11 matches. So, for people to say that he was a must own, or even to have, conversations with regards to, the Salah and Fernandes, I don't get it. Where does it come from? Because it certainly isn't backed up by the data. And yes, he got himself a penalty last night, but it's certainly nowhere near the Bruno that hit the ground running when he first arrived in the Premier League. So the injury to Anthony, that's almost certain to keep him out of not only this weekend, but probably the FA Cup final as well, although we're waiting for an update on that. Of course, it was less than 24 hours ago. We've seen Fernandes move out to that right-hand side, particularly during the Manchester derby. So he is one that could potentially go out of there. I've looked at this again as an opportunity maybe to get some minutes and legs ahead of that final. Rashford, I'm fairly confident in saying that he will start. Injury and illness, I think he needs that sharpness. I think he needs a start. And of course, there are always concerns with regards to Anthony Martial starting games in quick succession, which is why I have Rashford leading the line. Wout Weghorst, he won't be staying past his loan, so I don't really see the need to involve him. And Scott McTominay, back from his injury, played a big part before he was sidelined. I have him coming in alongside Casemiro, and that frees Christian Eriksen to play a little bit higher up the pitch.
We have got a question. Luke Shaw definitely sell this week.
I certainly don't see him. We know that the injury isn't believed to be anything too serious, but again, I think Erik ten Hag will look to the fact that, again, it's it's that you don't take anything from risking players in this. They've secured Champions League football, whether that's in third or fourth. So their mind will shift to that Manchester derby in the FA Cup, which is why we have Malacia starting at left back. And I've also thrown Harry Maguire in there as well, given the fact that Rafael Varane has had numerous ongoing injury problems this season. And again, they played on Thursday night. So maybe just rest the Spaniard, keep him right and keep him fit for that Wembley appearance.
And Jaron Lee says, is it worth selling Shaw when we have Stuppian/Henry on the bench, as I don't think they'll keep a clean sheet, or focus on mid/attack transfers for punts? I think you've got to go with the mid in the attack. These are going to be high variance games, lots of goals, lots of fun. And yeah, really wants to do an end of season defensive transfer, play free at the back, have as many, stuff your team full of attacking players, because that's where it's going to be. We see game week 38 always has a high amount of goals statistically. I can't remember how much above the average, but it's always way above the average. Newcastle up next. Are we going to see the Isaac Wilson duo return?
I think so. I think we may see a slight tweak in formation from Eddie Howe, and that may be forced just because of the injury situation. Now, again, I'm sort of guessing and reading between the lines, and it's Champions League football now, so we know Bruno Guimaraes, he's been injured really since that home game with Fulham, that ongoing ankle problem. I think even in an interview this week, Guimaraes said that he was really frustrated. He went through a period where he picked up 5 separate injuries to that ankle during the course of a month. And while he says that he is in a lot better place, he still hasn't looked like the player that we've seen earlier in the season, and we do often see him limping through those final moments of recent matches. Joe Linton is another one who's been ruled out through injury, picked up that initial knock against Brighton, although he was managing something before that, named in the squad against Leicester, but was pulled out during the warm-up after aggravating that. So we're looking at Jacob Murphy to come in on that right-hand side, picked up a problem, done really well. Miguel Almiron has looked great. I just think Murphy may get the nod. San Maxim, an opportunity to shine as well. Longstaff and Anderson. The only other sort of maybe discussion point could be around Fabian Shaw. There's a loading issue there. I suspect it's either maybe a plantar fasciitis or a tendinitis in the Achilles. With that, he missed the internationals towards the back end of March for Switzerland because of that problem, so he needs to be managed. And that could be one where we see maybe I have Matty Targett coming in on the left. It wouldn't be ideal, but, and Jamal Lascelles would be a player who would potentially come in for Shaw, but Dan Burn could be moved centrally. Just a thought, just putting it out there and something to consider.
Interesting. We move to the final few teams. Not a lot of interest in Forest, but what is the latest with them?
Haven't heard from Steve Cooper, but not expecting massive changes. Danilo has been managing an ongoing hamstring issue. That's why he isn't in the team at the moment. If that's the case, Brennan Johnson to come in and take his place with a slight formational tweak.
Are you a fan of the film School of Rock, Ben?
I'm not a particular fan of, is it Joe Black? Am I right?
Yeah, Jack Black.
Jack Black. I'm not a big fan of him, so and I haven't seen the film, so.
Oh no! Basically, I watched it this week with my friend, and they said that the Nottingham Forest manager looks like Ned Schneebly from the film. So you won't get the reference then if I say Ned Schneebly. It's a shame. That is a shame. But maybe people in the comments will know what is going on there. Southampton again. Don't think anybody's much interested. But what is the latest there?
Ruben Sellis was one of those managers that spoke at 1:30. To be honest, he was down the bottom of my list of priorities in terms of getting the team news, so I'm yet to listen or hear what he said. Suffice to say, he has spoke about the possibility of involving some of those academy product players in the squad, and he will already be preparing that Saints team for second tier football, which is why we've seen the return of James Bree, maybe Aribo up front alongside Alcaraz. Not expecting Shea Adams to be past fit. He's missed out the last few due to that calf strain.
There you go. Magic69 says Hennessy is terrible, goals galore to be expected, but he might want to put out a good performance against his old team. You never know. But I agree. I think that is just going to be a goals galore one. Spurs, again, we've both reiterated the points that I think it's going to be a shock result there, that they lose or that they have a really tough time. Kane, on the other hand, we do have somebody who understands the reference of School of Rock. Tottenham, Kane is probably the only player that you want in there, and he could do well against a pretty bad Leeds defence. But what is the news from the rest of the team? Is there any positives, negatives?
Yeah, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has trained, so therefore we have him returning to the team. Christian Romero is a player that will come out of that starting 11. He's failed a late fitness test, so he won't be involved. It could be Davison Sanchez. Don't expect too many changes in terms of the setup for Spurs.
So yeah, Gregor has said Steve Cooper is not hardcore unless he lives hardcore. Perisic is injured, asks Marius.
Not to my knowledge, but again, Ryan Mason was one of those glut of press conferences at 1:30. Out of favour, yes, certainly, but I'm not aware of any injury problems as it currently stands. But again, keep your eyes and ears peeled and follow the usual channels.
Head to Premier Injuries or Ben's Twitter. Maybe it's just an injured ego, as he's been told. He's not very good. West Ham. Oh, the disabled team has just joined us now. He said, "Hi guys, watch back. We've gone through all the teams alphabetically so that you can catch up nice and easy." The Hammers, we think that they might do the business against Leicester, but is there going to be a lot of rotation because of an eye on the European final?
I think David Moyes will go pretty strong as well. Again, you want to be keeping the players relatively fit and sharp ahead of that Conference League Cup final. This is the last opportunity for them to do so. Naif Agard missed out last weekend with a dead leg. He's been past fit. Elsewhere, Soufal, he's recovered from a hamstring issue. So yeah, I'm expecting the Hammers to keep fundamentally what we've seen for most of the season as their nucleus of their 11.
What about my dingaling Danny Ings? Is he going to be given a chance?
Certainly not from the start, in my opinion. Mikel Antonio has responded to Danny Ings, I suppose, coming into the team and maybe seen that as a way, that pick up the backside for him to go out and really sort of perform. And we've seen those performances from Mikel Antonio. The only slight concern may be if there are issues with that calf problem that Mikel Antonio has been managing in recent weeks. In which case, Danny Ings could come into that start 11. But up until this point, he has trained and there are no sort of major issues or concerns with the side.
So my dingaling, you don't think David Moyes wants to play with my dingalings?
Not from the start.
We move on to the final team of the final game of this season. Is this an emotional one for you, Ben? We're winding up here, or are you happy to just see this through?
Absolutely over the moon, by the way. I'm counting down every single minute of not only the live stream of this season. However, a couple of days away from the mic and the camera and the computer, I'll be fully refreshed and I'll be champing at the bit to return in the summer, ready for pre-season as we always do. With regards to Wolves, this is a team. Julian Lopetegui done a fantastic job in terms of helping the club remain in the top flight. They were bottom at Christmas Day. We all know ordinarily what that means. You're down, but they haven't. There are a lot of players out of contract with the club. A lot of players who are linked with moves away. So we shall see. this lineup will be a difficult one to predict. We've seen, I think it was Max Kilman, game week 37 was touted as the game against James Tarkowski and Max Kilman, the only two players in the top flight to have played every single minute of every single Premier League game. And what does Lopetegui do? He only goes and drop Max Kilman for Craig Dawson. So, for Nathan Collins. But I threw Kilman back in there just, for old time's sake.
Now, you were going to have a word with me earlier for what I said about potentially Newcastle losing to Chelsea. GV says Wolves can cause a surprise and upset against Arsenal. I mean, I don't know if we can allow such talk in the chat. But yeah, well, this is the last goodbye. We'll be having, I guess, some pre-season training, pre-season output that everybody should stay subscribed to. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. We've got lots of great content, great guests coming up as well, and just some fantastic analysis that Ben and I are both working on. You can also suggest some content that you'd like to see over the summer too, and we'll try our best to get that out there. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck. We hope you smash your leagues and that you get your first places, that you win your prizes and all that, and have a fantastic game week 38. Is there anything else you want to say, Ben, before we head off?
No, just thank everybody, all our followers, old and new, all your contributions, all of your questions. Really have enjoyed it. This is the first full season that we've done this deadline stream at 2:15 on a Friday, and I think I've really enjoyed it. There's been lots of great interaction, lots of friends, so I'm looking forward to returning next year, and thanks, and hope you keep on following.
Yeah, do keep on following, and I guess we can give a teaser. The next week we have an exclusive discussion about a certain team in the Premier League and why they're doing so well. Ben, do you want to give a little bit of insight into that?
I'll leave it at that, Jason.
Oh, okay. Well, mysterious. You have to stay subscribed for that, and we will love you and leave you. Thank you so much for the lovely comments. Marius says bye. See you next season. Sam says thank you. GV says see you guys next season. All the best. Legends from Slavcho, hopefully we'll see you in 1080p next season. New mic, shoes, and butchered names, of course, the butchered names.